That's what Pete's wife believed about the old green truck sitting in Monica McCrae's driveway. The rusted fenders, the chipped paint, the worn leather seats remembered everyone who'd ever sat in them. She saw something in it, something that had been through hell and still kept going. And maybe that's what Monica needed most, because she wasn't just buying a used truck. She was carrying someone's story, someone's grief, and, slowly, her own healing. If a truck can have a soul, imagine what's possible in us. Like, subscribe, and keep listening. Sometimes the smallest stories carry the deepest truths. The morning sun hadn't burned through the September fog when Monica's Honda gave out on Highway 12. One sharp rattle, then silence. She coasted to the shoulder, steam curling from under the hood like a white flag. She didn't cry right away. She just sat there, hands gripping the wheel, heart pounding with a frustration that had nothing to do with engines or timing. This wasn't just a car. It was everything holding her life together. Groceries, rent, the job she hadn't even started yet. And now it sat dead, 3 blocks from her new apartment, on the edge of a town that didn't know her name. Monica McCrae was 26, divorced, new in a mountain town where everyone else had cousins, church directories, and second-grade teachers who'd taught their parents. She had none of that. Just a fragile job offer from Jefferson Elementary, a half-unpacked apartment that still smelled like someone else's life, and divorce papers tucked neatly in the glove box, signed dated, and still sharp around the edges. David hadn't been cruel, just careless. He'd promised things, stability, forever. Then one day, he simply wasn't promising anymore. She'd crossed 3 state lines in that Honda, trying to outrun the silence he left behind. Gas station coffee, cheap motels, GPS reroutes, and the whisper-thin hope that a change in scenery might be enough to fix what time hadn't touched. Now, the car sat lifeless. So did her plan. She checked her phone, 1 bar. Her bank account, less than she remembered. Her first paycheck was still 2 weeks away, and most of her savings had gone to securing the apartment. A tow truck came. The driver was kind, older, and didn't ask too many questions. Just looked at her with the kind of quiet that comes from seeing broken people on the side of the road too often. Pete's lot on Elm Street, he offered, pointing down the hill, might find something that'll last. He's fair, if a bit hard-edged. The lot was tucked under a canopy of dying elm trees. Cars parked like crooked teeth along a gravel stretch. A hand-painted sign leaned against a weathered trailer. Pete's used cars, fair prices, no nonsense. And through the fog, Monica could hear it, metal on metal, the soundtrack of something being fixed. Pete stepped out from behind a blue sedan, wiping his hands on a rag that had long given up on being clean. Maybe 50, maybe more, it was hard to tell. His face was weathered, the kind that came from meeting problems head-on for years without blinking. His gray hair was clipped short, and his eyes held the wary calm of someone who'd learned most people came asking for more than they could afford. But behind that guarded stare, something flickered. Not anger, not suspicion, grief. Maybe worn thin and folded quietly, the kind that doesn't shout, only settles. On the shoulders, in the silence, the kind that rewrites a man without changing his name. Need a car, Monica said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. Her voice cracked slightly on the word car, betraying the desperation she was trying to hide. He studied her for a moment, the way she held her purse strapped like a lifeline, the careful way she dressed for her new job, the slight tremor in her voice that suggested this wasn't just about transportation. His gaze wasn't unkind, but it was thorough, the assessment of someone who'd learned to read people's circumstances in the set of their shoulders. Budget? He asked, his voice gravelly from years of breathing engine fumes and mountain air. 3,000, maybe 3,500 if it's worth it. Pete nodded once and walked toward the back of the lot. He stopped beside a green pickup truck that looked like it had been painted by time itself. Patches of rust blooming across the hood like wildflowers. Chrome bumpers that had lost their shine but kept their strength. 92 Ford, he said, running his palm along the tailgate like he was greeting an old friend. Engine solid. The transmission was rebuilt a couple of years back. She's got miles, but she's still got some fight left. He glanced at Monica, measuring her silence. 3,000, he added, tax and title included. No surprises. The way he said it, quiet, matter of fact, felt more like an offering than a sales pitch. Like he wasn't just naming a price, but passing on something that had earned its right to keep going. Monica walked around the truck, trying to see past the surface scars to whatever Pete saw underneath. The tires were good, the interior was clean if worn, and when Pete turned the key, the engine caught on the first try with a low, steady rumble that sounded almost like contentment. "I don't sell junk on purpose," Pete said, handing her the keys. It wasn't a sales pitch, it was something quieter, more like a promise. She signed the papers, not because she wanted to, because she needed to. This lot, this gruff man who spoke in short sentences and looked at her like he understood something about necessity. The paperwork took 10 minutes, and Pete's handshake was firm and final. "She'll get you where you're going," he said as Monica climbed into the driver's seat. The truck became part of Monica's new life in quiet, unexpected ways, hauling school supplies, groceries, and a donated bookshelf from the church. It carried her through early morning stillness and late-night lesson plans, always ready for whatever the day asked of her. Each morning, the truck waited in her driveway, patient as an old dog. The driver's seat had molded to her shape, and she'd learned its quirks, the slight hesitation before the engine caught, the hum in the wheel at 45, the radio crackle near the old tower on Miller Road. The truck wasn't pretty, but it was reliable in the way that mattered most. It showed up. Every morning, it started. Every evening, it brought her home. In a life upended by divorce and distance, it was the one constant. It asked for nothing but gas and the occasional oil change, and in return, it carried her forward, day after day, mile after mile. Her students noticed the truck too. During recess, some of them would press their faces against the classroom windows to look at it in the parking lot. "Why is your truck so old, Miss Monica?" asked Emma, a precocious 8-year-old with pigtails and endless questions. "Sometimes old things work better than new things," Monica had replied, surprising herself with how much she meant it. "They've learned what matters." At school, Monica began to find her rhythm. Her third graders were curious and kind, full of questions about where she'd come from and why she'd chosen their small town. She told them she'd come for the mountains and stayed for the people, which was true enough, even if it wasn't the whole story. Principal Evans was helpful and encouraging, but when Monica mentioned she'd bought Pete's truck, his eyebrows rose slightly. "Pete fixed our maintenance truck once," he said. "Showed up after hours, worked all night, had it running by morning, never asked for payment, never mentioned it again." He glanced toward the lot where Monica's green truck sat. "He's honest, just hard to read." What Monica didn't know was that Pete's nephew, Tim, 19 and eager to impress, had rushed the final service check. Distracted by plans and young impatience, he skipped the carburetor adjustment, missed a loose fuel line, and signed off too soon. Pete hadn't known. When he promised the truck would get her where she was going, he meant it. 2 days later, the truck died. Monica was on her way to school, running over her lesson plan for fractions, when the engine coughed twice and went silent. She coasted to the shoulder of Maple Street, 3 blocks from Jefferson Elementary, and tried the ignition. Nothing. Not even the courtesy of a grinding sound or a defeated wheeze. She sat in the cab, hands on the wheel, feeling that sharp anger that comes from being let down by something you trusted. The truck had been her one stroke of luck in a year short on both luck and good. Now it sat as dead as her marriage, another plan gone quiet. The irony wasn't lost on her. 3 states away from one breakdown, stranded 3 blocks from her new job in another. It felt cosmic, like the universe was mocking her fresh start. By the time she reached school and phoned for a tow, Monica had already drafted a mental complaint. Pete had promised no junk, and yet, 2 days in, the truck was silent as a grave. The practical part of her whispered, "These things happen," but the part that had been burned by vows and signatures, the part still reeling from a husband who once said forever, was already building walls. She stared at her phone. Her thumb hovered over his name, but something held her back. Maybe it was the way he'd handed her the keys, not like a dealer closing a sale, but like someone handing over something sacred, something with weight, like he wasn't letting go of a truck, but entrusting her with a story, she put the phone down and waited. That evening, as Monica sat at her kitchen table grading papers and trying not to think about how she'd get to work tomorrow, she heard the sound of a truck in her driveway. Through the window, she saw Pete climbing out of a work truck, a metal toolbox in one hand and something that might have been concern creasing his weathered face. He knocked once, a solid rap that wasn't quite apologetic, but wasn't defensive either. "Heard she didn't make it past Thursday," he said when Monica opened the door. She hadn't called him, hadn't sent word through anyone at school, somehow. In the way that small towns work, the news had found him anyway. "No, she didn't," Monica said, crossing her arms. 48 hours, Pete. 48 hours. He nodded, accepting the reproach without argument. "Mind if I take a look?" Monica had expected excuses. Maybe a suggestion that she'd done something wrong. Possibly an offer to look at it in the morning when the light was better. She hadn't expected Pete to set his toolbox down in her driveway and pop the hood. While the sun was still setting. "You don't have to," she started. "Yeah, I do," he said simply, and something in his voice made her step back and let him work. Monica made dinner and tried to grade, but kept glancing out the window. Pete worked steadily, checking connections, muttering under his breath maybe a curse, maybe a prayer. At 10 o'clock, she made coffee and brought him a cup. He accepted it with a nod but didn't stop working. At midnight, she went to bed, leaving the porch light on like a lighthouse beacon for a lost sailor. She woke at 2 a.m. From a dream of David leaving. Pete was still outside, hunched over the engine, work light casting sharp shadows. He looked smaller in that glow, not older, just worn, like he was fixing more than just the truck. Monica pulled on a robe and stepped onto the porch. The October air was sharp with the promise of winter, and she could see her breath in small puffs. Pete's work light created a circle of harsh illumination in the darkness, making everything beyond it seem vast and unknowable. "Pete," she said softly, not wanting to startle him. "It's 2 in the morning." He looked up, blinking in the porch light like someone surfacing from deep water. There was something different in his expression, a vulnerability that the daylight hours usually kept hidden. His hands were stained with grease and streaked with something that might have been tears, or might have been sweat. "Almost got her," he said, his voice rougher than usual. Fuel line was loose. The carburetor needed adjusting. Should have caught it before. He paused, looking back at the engine. "Claire always said I was too careful with cars, not careful enough with people." Maybe she was right. Monica felt something shift in the air between them, some barrier cracking open to reveal the man beneath the gruff exterior. "You don't have to." "Yeah," he said again, but this time his voice was quieter, more broken. "I do. Because if I don't fix what's broken, who will?" The next morning, the truck started on the first try. Pete was gone, but there was a note tucked under the windshield wiper. "She's ready now." Monica drove to school, windows down, engine steady beneath her feet. The mountains stood quiet under their first snow. For the first time since arriving, she felt like she might belong. That afternoon, Tim showed up at her apartment, tall, lanky, eyes on his shoes, pockets deep. 19 and restless. He moved like Pete, same quiet intensity, same stubborn jaw. "I was supposed to finish the tune-up," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Before you bought her, I didn't." He didn't know. Tim looked young and miserable, the way people look when they've disappointed someone who matters to them. Monica could see the weight of his mistake in the slope of his shoulders, the way he couldn't meet her eyes. "I had plans that night," Tim continued, his voice gaining strength as the words came faster. "There was this girl, and I thought the work could wait. I've been working for Uncle Pete since I was 16, and I thought one time wouldn't matter." He finally looked up, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "But it did. It mattered to you, and it mattered to him." Monica invited Tim in for coffee, sensing that this conversation needed more than a doorstep confession. But he shook his head, backing away like someone who didn't deserve comfort. "He worked all night because of my screw-up," Tim said. "Didn't say anything to me about it. Just fixed what I should have done right the first time. That's not Uncle Pete. He's never had to clean up after anyone but me. Just wanted you to know it wasn't his fault." He added before turning to leave, Pete doesn't sell junk on purpose. That's not who he is. That's not who he's ever been. That weekend, Monica stopped by Thompson's Market for groceries and overheard two women talking in the produce aisle. She recognized them from church: Mrs. Rowan, who ran the library, and Jana Mills, whose husband owned the hardware store. Heard Pete fix that new teacher's truck, Mrs. Rowan said, testing the ripeness of an avocado with the practiced squeeze of someone who'd been buying groceries for 40 years. That's not like him, Jana replied, shaking her head as she sorted through the apples. Usually, you buy from Pete, it's your problem after that. Man's been running that lot for 15 years, and I've never heard of him making house calls. Maybe she's different somehow, or maybe he's getting soft. Grief does strange things to people. Monica moved to the next aisle, but the conversation stayed with her like smoke in her clothes. She was beginning to understand that Pete's midnight repair job was as much of a surprise to the town as it had been to her. The Pete they knew was fair but distant, reliable but not involved. The man who'd worked under her porch light until dawn was someone else entirely. Or maybe it was the same man, just finally given a reason to care again. At school, the other teachers began to treat her differently, too. Word had spread about Pete's unusual behavior, and Monica found herself the subject of curious glances and careful questions. During lunch in the teacher's lounge, Principal Evans sat down beside her with his usual cup of coffee. Heard Pete took care of your truck trouble, he said, his tone neutral, but his eyes curious. He did, Monica replied, not sure how much she wanted to share about those midnight hours. That's something, Evans said thoughtfully. Pete's good people, but he's been distant since Claire passed. Nice to hear he's helping someone new in town. The way he said new in town made Monica wonder how long it took to stop being new here, instead of just living in it. For 3 golden weeks, the truck purred without protest, steady, reliable, hers. Then came a Tuesday in October, sharp with falling leaves and bad timing. Monica was backing out of the school lot when a distracted parent clipped the rear bumper. Nothing major, but enough to leave a dent and crack the left taillight. She was still crouched near the damage, fingers tracing the bent metal, when another engine rumbled into the lot. Pete. He often stopped by on Tuesdays, dropping off parts for the district, checking on the old maintenance van. But this time, when he stepped out and saw the dented panel, he didn't speak. He just stood there, still as the mountains behind him, his eyes fixed on the wound like it had opened something older than the truck itself. Same kind of dent, he said quietly. Same side. His voice had changed, grown smaller somehow, more fragile. Monica watched as Pete ran his fingers along the damaged metal, and she saw that his hands were shaking. Pete, she said, are you okay? He stayed rooted to the spot, his expression hollowing out as if the dent had knocked loose something buried deep. My wife died in this truck, he said, the words sounding like they'd been buried for years. 3 years ago, accident on Highway 12, same kind of dent, same side. Monica felt the ground shift beneath her feet. This wasn't just a truck. It was a grave marker, a story trapped in steel and paint. I shouldn't have sold it, Pete said, voice catching, but I didn't know how else to let go. I couldn't stand to see it in my driveway every morning, but I couldn't bring myself to junk it either. He pressed the tailgate with both hands, as if grounding himself. When he looked up, the weight was still in his eyes. She picked this truck, he said, looking up at Monica with eyes that held 3 years' worth of unshed tears. Said it looked like someone who'd been through hell but kept moving. Like you, she said. Monica sat beside him on the tailgate, understanding now why Pete had sold her this particular truck, why he'd worked through the night to fix it, why the whole transaction had felt like something more than business. Tell me about her, Monica said gently. Pete was quiet for a long moment, watching the afternoon shadows grow longer across the parking lot. Claire, he said finally. She taught kindergarten here for 20 years. Kids called her Mrs. Pete. He almost smiled. She said this old truck had soul, said things that have been through trouble, and come out the other side understand something about what matters. They sat in comfortable silence while the school emptied around them. To people who'd found each other through a rusty truck that carried more history than either of them had known. That evening, Pete Pete returned with tools and a replacement taillight. As he worked, he shared more stories about Claire. How she'd insisted on buying the truck because it reminded her of her grandfather's farm truck. How she'd named it Mabel after her grandmother. How she'd driven it to school every day until the morning she didn't come home. She left a note in the glove box, Pete said, tightening the last bolt on the new taillight. Found it after the funeral. Never showed it to anyone. The next morning, Monica sat in the driver's seat before starting the engine. She opened the glove box and found what Pete had left for her. A small metal plaque that read "Keep Goin'." Kid, and a photo of a woman with kind eyes standing beside the green truck. On the back of the photo, in careful handwriting, she said this thing had soul. Monica held the photo for a long moment, understanding that she'd become the keeper of something precious. Not just a truck, but a love story that had found a way to continue. A week later, after a staff meeting, a parent lingered by the parking lot as Monica packed up her things. "Can't believe you're still driving that old thing," the woman said, nodding toward the green truck. "My husband's selling a Honda, much newer, safer. Might be better for someone like you." Monica smiled politely, but the offer stuck. A newer car meant peace of mind. No engine hiccups, no rust, no memories baked into the dashboard. It was the sensible choice, the smart one. That evening, the sun had already dipped behind the mountains when Monica slid into the truck's cab. The air was cool, quiet. Her thumb drifted over the edge of Claire's photo tucked just beside the dash. A whisper of a woman she never knew but carried with her every day. A knock on the driver's side window pulled her back. Pete stood outside, hands in the pockets of his worn jacket, his silhouette soft in the fading light. "Heard someone offered you a different car," he said. No judgment, just observation. Monica rolled down the window. "Word travels fast in this town." Pete nodded once. "If you're done with her, I'll take her back. She doesn't belong in a junkyard." For a long moment, Monica didn't answer. She studied him, this man who had handed over a piece of his past, who'd fixed what wasn't hers to break, who didn't say much but meant everything he said. "Why'd you give her to me?" she asked, her voice quieter than before. Pete exhaled slowly, eyes on the hood, then lifted them to meet hers. "You look like someone who needed something with a little soul," he said. The words hung in the stillness between them. Monica turned the key. The engine hummed to life, steady and familiar. She looked back at Pete. "She's already home." Pete gave the faintest smile, then stepped back into the twilight as Monica pulled away, her hand resting just below the plaque. That still whispered, "Keep going, kid." The truck hummed a little softer after that, not from any mechanical improvement, but from the peace that comes with knowing where you belong. Each morning, Monica touched the small plaque before starting the engine, and each morning, the truck carried her to work with the steady reliability of something that understood its purpose. Monica left a folded note at Pete's garage. "Your wife had good taste, so do you." Pete found it later that afternoon and quietly tucked it into his wallet, next to Claire's photo. At the garage, Tim worked more carefully now, double-checking his work, taking time to do things right the first time. Pete didn't lecture him about the importance of thoroughness. He didn't need to. Respect was being taught without words, passed down through the example of a man who understood that every job mattered, because it mattered to someone else. On a gray November afternoon, one of Monica's students missed the bus after staying late to finish a project. Monica found her sitting on the school steps, looking worried. "Need a ride?" Monica asked. The girl looked at the green truck with its patches of rust and faded paint. "That old truck still works, better than ever." As they drove through town, the girl asked about the truck's history, and Monica found herself telling Claire's story, about love and loss and the way some things carry meaning beyond their appearance. "So it's like a magic truck?" the girl asked. Monica smiled, one hand resting just below the plaque that read "Keep Going, Kid." "Something like that," she said. The truck rumbled on through the quiet streets, carrying its passengers and their stories, proof that the roughest exteriors often shelter the deepest truths. In a world quick to overlook the worn and weathered, the green truck kept moving, connecting lives, carrying love forward, 1 mile at a time. Sometimes, heroes are gruff mechanics who work through the night to keep promises they never meant to make. Sometimes, They're teachers who see past the rust and recognize the soul beneath. And sometimes they're old trucks that know a thing or two about endurance, about showing up, holding on, and being useful long after the shine is gone. Monica drove with quiet purpose now, a hand resting just below the plaque on the dash. Her journey woven into the quiet legacy of a woman she never met and the love of a man she was only beginning to understand. Behind her, the town unfolded like a living map, full of stories waiting to be discovered, hearts waiting to be seen, and moments that remind us that strength often wears the softest face. Everyday heroes are all around us. You just have to look beneath the surface to find them.